Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on the notification bell to support our work. Thanks in advance. We are not the first humanity, and we won't be the last. The evidence is all around us. If only we're willing to see it. Time is a relative concept. It can be stretched, compressed, or even altered, as Albert Einstein demonstrated in his theory of relativity, depending on physical factors like the mass of a star or celestial body. Moreover, the very notion of time varies depending on the form of life. A common housefly, for example, lives an average of about 20 days, compared to 80 years for a human being. On our time scale, one fly hour would be the equivalent of 2 human months. And yet, despite how imperceptible the very concept of time can be, humanity, especially in our modern society, places an overwhelming amount of importance and value on it. Time governs our daily lives, our societies, our organization, and our work, perfectly summed up by that beloved saying of capitalism: time is money. We're constantly trying to catch up with it, a pursuit that is, of course, utterly futile. And yet, human beings have a deep, almost visceral need to anchor themselves to time, to organize and plan their actions, their movements, and their futures along this intangible timeline. In order to envision the future, the human species seems to require a firm position within the flow of time. We need to understand our past, to explore our origins, in short, to know our own history. History. Now that's another very peculiar concept. While it seems unthinkable for an individual not to know their own personal story, from birth to the present moment, including all the major events that shaped their life, the same doesn't hold true when it comes to entire species. For centuries now, our civilization has been endlessly searching for its origins, its past, in an effort to rewrite its forgotten story, like an amnesiac entity trying to recover lost memories. The turbulence of civilization, wars, pandemics, massive migrations, or the will of certain rulers has the unfortunate effect of erasing entire chapters of history, wiping out centuries, even millennia, of memory and knowledge, like a pencil eraser sweeping away the past. Since we no longer truly know our origins or our past, we've developed a process to try and piece together the fragmented puzzle of our planet's and our species' history. Today, we consider written records from the past, texts, engravings, or any surviving material inscriptions as official sources of history. Every piece of writing provides us with concrete data, names, timelines, and geographic references that help anchor the past. In fact, it's the invention of writing that marks the beginning of what we call history in our civilization. Anything that predates the earliest written records falls under prehistory, a time before events could be documented in a tangible and lasting way. That's why we now consider the great Sumerian civilization of Mesopotamia to be the cradle of our own. It represents the oldest known form of writing to date, going back more than 6,000 years. Although various forms of writing, sometimes primitive, have been found around the world, carved into wood or stone, we generally cannot consider them as full writing systems. Due to the rarity of these symbols and the lack of connection to an identifiable culture or civilization, they are typically classified as proto-writing. This method of legitimizing history through written records has the advantage of providing traceable sources. It offers structured, organized evidence intended to convey data, facts, or events. But this approach also has many flaws. Even within our own civilization, we know that those in charge of recording history have often chosen, for various reasons, to distort the facts, whether to strengthen their power or satisfy their ego. As a result, the written records we rely on may offer a warped view of past events. After all, isn't it said that history is written by the victors? Relying solely on written records from the past doesn't give us an accurate representation of reality. But that may be only a minor issue compared to the broader misunderstanding of our true origins. Beyond the ideological narrowing of acceptable sources, there is also the overwhelming weight of dogma. Whether religious or scientific, this trait, common among those who claim to hold the keys to modern knowledge, undoubtedly stands as one of the greatest obstacles in the search for truth. To put it simply, if you even slightly question the officially accepted view, you're wrong. The dates, locations, and labels deemed established and validated by the establishment are virtually untouchable, no matter how relevant the questions, how solid the sources, or how compelling the evidence may be. Dogmas trap those who follow them in an ideological funnel, narrowing their vision to a single direction, the one they're meant to see. It's like placing your hand over a child's eyes to keep them from seeing the toy aisle in a store. The major problem is that the inconsistencies are so numerous, and the answers, when they do exist, are often so unsatisfying that they fail to convince the most curious and open-minded individuals. In the mid-19th century, Charles Darwin shook the ideological foundations of modern civilization by proposing a new explanation for our origins and the evolution of life as a whole. He became the symbolic figurehead in the battle between the church and science. The grand vision of our creation thus shifted from a divine will that supposedly made us in its image in a single act to a long and seemingly endless chain of natural evolution, where the most well-adapted individuals survive, grow, and pass on their genes. This evolutionist view is now widely accepted and regarded as an absolute unshakable truth, positioning science as the clear victor in the ideological battle against the church. However, it was science itself, several decades later, that began to run into problems with its own theories. While the Darwinian framework appears coherent and well-constructed overall, many aspects, especially those concerning our own species, have gradually revealed the limitations of this theory. Although Darwinian ideology has somewhat evolved in recent decades, no longer placing our species, Homo sapiens sapiens, at the top of a linear evolutionary ladder of hominids, but rather as the result of multiple crossbreeds between different species that once existed, the core principle of natural evolution still relies on the slow, often extremely slow, succession of genetic mutations in individuals over tens or even hundreds of millions of years. The traces of the various hominid species that once roamed the earth are, in reality, extremely rare. In fact, a single skeleton, often incomplete and partially recovered, is often enough for science to define the genealogy of an entire species. It remains impossible to factually explain the vast genetic gap that separates our species from the other hominids. The missing link, that hypothetical intermediate species between primitive hominids and modern humans, was, for decades, the ultimate answer to this question. That is, until the arrival of genetics. This groundbreaking field has especially highlighted the monumental differences between the brain systems of Homo sapiens and those of other hominids. According to the Darwinian model, such an evolutionary leap should have taken hundreds of millions of years, but in reality, it appears as a sudden and inexplicable jump occurring over just a few tens of thousands of years. Our species has undergone at least two major evolutionary leaps over the past several millennia, propelling Homo sapiens into a world entirely different from that of all other living species. These leaps have driven us to develop disciplines that are found in no other species on Earth. Complex language, writing, art, spirituality, architecture, science, medicine, and mathematics, these are all uniquely human traits found in no other species. This simple fact alone is enough to call into question the mainstream narrative surrounding the emergence of Homo sapiens, our origins, and our history with a capital H. But burdened by the weight of dogma and a painful lack of satisfying answers, the official version remains unchanged. If natural evolution applies to all forms of life, then why have some species remained unchanged for millions of years? Why don't great apes build permanent shelters or craft tools? Why does our species seem so fundamentally different and distant from all the others? These countless questions, yet legitimate and deeply relevant, are simply brushed aside by those who claim to hold absolute knowledge and ultimate truth. Without seeking further answers or deeper understanding, they contribute to the writing of our distorted history. If writing is the temporal marker that defines our civilization's entry into recorded history, then ancient structures are undoubtedly the most striking evidence of the disconnect between official narratives and the undeniable clues left in stone. Historians, archaeologists, anthropologists, and Egyptologists who shape our understanding of history often like to say that human ingenuity can overcome any obstacle. It's a perspective that sounds poetic and glorifying when speaking of ancient civilizations, but the physical evidence tells a very different story. History books are filled with diagrams that consistently depict ancient peoples shirtless, wearing simple skirts, equipped with copper chisels, hemp ropes, stone mallets, and an unimaginable number of wooden logs, all supposedly to help us understand how these ancient pre-technological civilizations with rudimentary knowledge managed to build the architectural wonders that still stand proudly across the earth today. Have all these history experts ever taken the time to ask engineers, technicians, or architects whether their theories are even feasible given the results we can see with our own eyes? The answer is no. And yet, the oldest ancient structures are by far the most impressive, not only in terms of scale, but also in their design, orientation, and above all, execution. There's a clear gap between the claims made by scientists across all disciplines and the actual physical results we can observe. Let's look at a few simple examples, where the numbers speak for themselves, both in terms of physical characteristics and their supposed place in the historical timeline. The foundations of the Temple of Jupiter in Baalbek, Lebanon, are made up of 3 massive carved stones known as the trilithon. Each one measures up to 18 meters in length, over 4 meters in height, and is estimated to weigh around 1,000 tons. The placement of these stones exceeds the technical capabilities of the Roman Empire, which is usually credited with their construction. However, these 3 stones were actually raised to a height of 10 meters and served only as the ancient foundation for the Roman temple built on top of them. The convenient solution for the official narrative is to credit the construction of the trilithon to the last known builders, in this case, the Roman Empire, simply because the established historical timeline must not be questioned. According to the official version of history, 2,000 years ago, humans were capable of cutting, transporting, and lifting 1,000-ton stones, even though today, with all our modern technology and hydraulic machinery, doing so would be incredibly expensive and extremely complex. Sacsayhuaman in Peru is renowned for its massive scale and complex construction. This site, attributed to the Incas simply because they were present when it was discovered, is home to what specialists refer to as the Fortress of Sacsayhuaman. This colossal structure, nearly 600 meters long, is made up of 3 cyclopean walls with sharply angled corners. The stones used in this structure, some weighing up to 200 tons, are all different and entirely unique, creating a heterogeneous construction that fits together like an indestructible anti-seismic puzzle. According to the official narrative, the Incas built this triple defensive wall around 500 years ago, measuring 18 meters high and over 600 meters long at an altitude of 3,700 meters, using stones over 200 tons in weight. All supposedly for the purpose of protecting themselves from external attacks. I'll let you imagine what kind of weapons the attackers must have had, because as a rule, defense tends to match the scale of the threat. To put it simply, if your enemies are attacking with bows and spears, you build wooden palisades. If they have catapults or trebuchets, you build thick stone walls. But what would be the point of constructing an enormous, indestructible fortress made of cyclopean walls if the only attackers you're facing are armed with spears, clubs, and slings? Once again, not only does the official version fail to answer the big question of how these cyclopean walls were built, it also fails to explain why such a construction was undertaken in the first place. Instead, it offers simplistic explanations designed to avoid challenging the established historical timeline. The dolmen of La Roche-aux-Fés, located in Brittany, France, is a megalithic structure dating back to the Neolithic period, around 3000 BCE. This passage dolmen measures about 20 meters in length, nearly 5 meters in width, and over 4 meters in height. It is made up of around 40 colossal stones, some weighing up to 40 tons, 8 of which were raised to a height of 1.5 meters to form the stone table that tops the dolmen. If building such a structure is already hard to imagine for the people of that time, the knowledge associated with it is even more astonishing. The orientation of this dolmen is perfectly aligned with the winter solstice, allowing the rising sun on that exact day to fully illuminate the inner stones. Understanding the winter solstice reveals a deep knowledge of astronomy and cosmic cycles, as it marks the end of the sun's decline and the beginning of its ascent, symbolizing the end of winter's darkness and the return of light and growth. And so, according to the official version of history, Neolithic people in Brittany, 5,000 years ago, living in small family clans, with no metal tools and only stone axes and wood, supposedly extracted, carved, transported over several kilometers, and raised stones weighing over 40 tons, all while precisely aligning the entire structure with the winter solstice. All of this during a time when humanity was just transitioning from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle to settled farming and early animal domestication. Isn't that just a little hard to believe? Let me be clear, I'm not questioning human ingenuity, far from it. Nor do I doubt the brilliance of ancient civilizations, whose achievements and adaptability are evident all around us. However, the three examples we've just explored clearly reveal a total disconnect between the observable, measurable facts and the official narrative about our history. These achievements, among hundreds of others, simply cannot be explained using the tools and knowledge that historians and archaeologists attribute to the people of that time. Even with today's powerful machines and motorized equipment, replicating such structures would be extremely difficult. And if it were possible, it would require massive financial resources, extensive infrastructure, and a large skilled workforce. And yet, we're told that ancient people simply did it, because it was supposedly possible using basic low-tech methods. That's like asking a kindergartner to take final exams. Something's not right. Something doesn't add up. It's as if entire pages of our great book of history are blank, painfully lacking in information and data. And yet, challenging the official version is virtually impossible. But the questions remain, and as for the answers, we're expected to settle for a few simplistic diagrams. But these historical inconsistencies aren't limited to the colossal, megalithic or cyclopean structures found across the world. One of the ultimate taboos in modern history is the idea of possible contact between different cultures around the world. We are not talking here about interactions between geographically close civilizations, like those of the Mediterranean basin, which traded and exchanged with each other and with Asia Minor for thousands of years, but rather about ancient cultural exchanges between continents located on opposite sides of the globe. Officially, aside from a few ancient Nordic sailors who are said to have accidentally reached the shores of North America during isolated voyages, no contact ever took place between the continents of the Old World and the Americas. And yet, archaeological discoveries, often ignored or quietly swept aside, raise serious questions and could potentially challenge the entire timeline of human development and even the foundations of history itself. Ask a historian or an archaeologist whether there could have been contact between the civilizations of Mesopotamia and those of South America, and the answer will be simple.
Absolutely out of the question.
According to the official version then, it's impossible. The timelines between these civilizations don't match, and more importantly, the distance, over 13,000 kilometers, and an entire ocean separate Mesopotamia from the Andes. So how do we explain this? The Fuente Magna Bowl is an artifact discovered in the 1950s by a local farmer in the Andean Lake region of Bolivia. Now displayed at the Museum of Precious Metals in La Paz, this large massive stone bowl is engraved on the outside with zoomorphic figures such as frogs and snakes, typical of pre-Columbian Andean cultures. But what truly raises questions is found inside the bowl. A text engraved in cuneiform script, Mesopotamian writing dating back over 6,000 years, originating from a region more than 13,000 kilometers away. Linguistic analysis revealed that the text is actually written in Proto-Sumerian and appears to be a dedication to the goddess Nia, who is associated with the Mesopotamian deity Nanshe, daughter of the god Enki, and the goddess Ninursag. A Sumerian text referencing a Mesopotamian goddess, the daughter of Enki, discovered in the Andes Mountains, Sounds strange to you? Maybe even impossible? And yet, this isn't the only discovery that suggests contact may very well have existed between these distant regions of the world. Father Carlo Crespi, an Italian missionary from the early 20th century based in Ecuador, spent years collecting and storing artifacts discovered in mysterious, secretive tunnels. The humble Ecuadorian population, grateful for Father Crespi's charitable work in the region, is said to have allowed him to collect dozens of unique artifacts tied to ancient South American culture. Among the various artifacts collected by Father Carlos Crespi was this. No, you're not dreaming. These are indeed representations of Mesopotamian deities. Here we see an Anunnaki god, Enlil, son of Anu and brother of Enki, one of the central figures of the sacred Mesopotamian triad. He is typically depicted with the head of an eagle, as Enlil is none other than the Lord of the Air. And what better creature to symbolize his majesty than the emblematic ruler of the skies? There is also a Lamassu, another iconic figure from Mesopotamian culture, a winged, human-headed bull symbolizing divine guardianship and power. We are not talking about vague similarities between two artistic styles. We are talking about an identical style in proportions, symbolism, visual execution, and craftsmanship. Just a few hundred kilometers away along the Andes, we find a Sumerian cuneiform text carved in stone, along with two gold representations of Mesopotamian deities, all more than 13,000 kilometers from the original location of a culture that was supposedly never in contact with this part of the world. It's true that, when you take a closer look, Mesoamerican pyramid architecture bears a stronger resemblance to Mesopotamian ziggurats than to Egyptian pyramids. From there, the questions come rushing in, and they're entirely legitimate. Did the Sumerians travel as far as South America? Did the Anunnaki gods roam the earth, leaving their mark on multiple human cultures? Were there ancient contacts between these civilizations, between the continents of our planet? In light of all the points mentioned so far, we have every right to question the grand historical narrative that's presented to us as absolute and unquestionable truth. History books consistently portray our species as the final product of a long evolutionary chain, the superior fruit of the great human lineage, and even of life on Earth itself. While this view may flatter the human ego, placing us at the very top of the Great Pyramid of evolution, the truth may be far longer and more complex than it seems. Official history begins with Sumer, the legendary Mesopotamian civilization that gave us the oldest known form of complex writing, dating back over 6,000 years. But this rich and intricate culture doesn't appear to be the result of a slow social evolution. Sumer seems to have emerged from the ground, suddenly, without warning, with a fully structured social system, a language, writing, spirituality, laws, and advanced knowledge in mathematics, medicine, architecture, and astronomy. Most notably, they had full mastery of agriculture and animal husbandry. Sumerian civilization then seems to appear suddenly, like a fully formed and complete model of society. It quite literally marks a turning point for humanity, shifting people from a nomadic hunter-gatherer lifestyle, vulnerable to the whims of nature, to a settled way of life, mastering natural forces, cultivating their own crops, and giving rise to what we now call civilization. Let's take a look at some official figures to better understand the situation. 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens appeared in Africa. They then coexisted with other species such as Neanderthals for more than 250,000 years until all other Homo species disappeared around 30,000 years ago. Then, Less than 10,000 years ago, humans developed agriculture and animal husbandry, paving the way for the rise of the first great civilizations. Based solely on our own example, it can take just 300,000 years for a species to reach our current level of civilization and technology. That number may seem enormous at first glance, but when compared to Earth's 4.5 billion years of existence, it's nothing more than the blink of an eye for our planet. The oldest traces of bipedal hominids found in Africa date back over 7 million years during the Miocene epoch, with the emergence of the hominina branch, the earliest precursor to the great human lineage. If we take our own civilizational example, 300,000 years to reach our current level of technology and culture is enough, and apply it to the full 7 million years of our species' existence, the math is simple. 7 million divided by 300,000. The result is thought-provoking. 23. So, chronologically and mathematically speaking, there could have been 23 civilizations at our level that rose and fell since the emergence of the human lineage. This leads us to an important question. Why would our species be the only one to have ever developed a civilization? Why should we believe that we are the ultimate pinnacle of evolution? The oldest ancient structures on the planet remain a mystery to this day. We don't know who built them, nor what techniques they used. Our scientists can only propose hypotheses which, lacking better alternatives, end up being treated as truth. Today, we can't date the carving of a stone itself, so instead, we date a bone fragment or a piece of charred wood found on site and automatically attribute the monument to that time frame, even though those remains could be thousands of years younger than the structure itself. But could it be that other civilizations or even other forms of humanity traveled the world long before the rise of our own civilization? While that may seem factually impossible, after all, if such ancient peoples had existed, we would expect to find traces of them. There are, however, certain key points that could very well shift that perspective. First, we need to understand that if humanity were to vanish completely today, suddenly, for whatever reason, all of our modern constructions would disappear entirely in less than 10,000 years. Only ancient megalithic structures like the Great Pyramids or Stonehenge would remain. Our buildings, roads, and all modern infrastructure would vanish entirely within a few thousand years, leaving no physical trace of our existence. Only a few artifacts, such as glass or plastic, might still bear witness to our presence on Earth for a few thousand years. If that's true for us, then why wouldn't it be true for others? Secondly, the possible traces of these ancient civilizations might still be right in front of us, yet we refuse to consider that they weren't built by our direct ancestors. Cyclopean walls, megaliths, colossal temples, and all those massive stone structures that have withstood the ages may very well be the last remnants of a forgotten time. But our ego-centered worldview blinds us to that possibility. Modern globalization, led by the West over the past few centuries, has effectively imposed its own version of reality, its own view of history and truth. Yet, if we make the effort to listen to the voices of the local peoples who live near these ancient monuments, we find that their accounts of the past are often strikingly similar, and they tend to say that it wasn't they, nor their ancestors, who built them, but that these monuments were already there long before, merely repurposed by the civilizations that came later. The Incas never claimed to have built the Cyclopean walls of Sacsayhuaman or the Titanic blocks of Pumapunku. The Romans left no record of constructing the Trilithon at Baalbek. The Maya left no trace of building Kukulkan. The Celts, no record of Stonehenge, Karnak or La Roche-aux-Fées. The Rapa Nui People, no explanation for the Moai. The Egyptians, no account of how the Great Pyramid was built. And yet, according to the official narrative, all of them were supposedly capable of accomplishing such feats. Once again, something doesn't add up. It's clear that entire chapters are missing from the great book of our history. But instead of dismissing ancient traditions, constantly labeling them as mere religious fantasies, why not give them genuine consideration? The oldest Mesoamerican traditions speak of the different sons of history. In this context, the word son refers to different civilizations, different humanities that succeeded one another through the ages, each bringing a part of their light to the world. According to these traditions, the number of humanities varies between 4 and 5, though it's unclear where our own civilization fits within that timeline. We may very well be the 5th and final one, which could explain why some texts only mention the 4 that came before. Each of these past civilizations or humanities had its own culture, its own language and great knowledge, but all of them vanished in cataclysmic events, storms, volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, or massive floods. These disasters ultimately wiped out those ancient peoples, clearing the way for our own humanity to rise and develop on Earth, up to the present day. Closer to our time, theosophical teachings, those esoteric doctrines that have survived since antiquity, tell us that at least 5 great civilizations have existed on our planet since time immemorial. These 5 humanities are said to have succeeded one another across the ages, sometimes even coexisting during the same time periods. Some of these civilizations are believed to have possessed a level of technology equal to or even beyond our own, while others seemed focused on values that modern humanity has long abandoned, yet which lie at the very heart of existence and life itself, natural energies and harmony with nature. These 5 great theosophical humanities are said to be, in chronological order, the Hyperborean civilization, the civilization of Mu, Lemuria, Atlantis, and finally, our own, the Adamic civilization. Across the globe, within modern cultures and civilizations that supposedly never interacted with one another, we find remarkably similar ancient traditions that speak of earlier humanities that came before us and have since vanished. And yet, this vision of previous humanities, of lost civilizations rising and falling, fits seamlessly into another ancient esoteric doctrine, the primordial tradition and the decline of cycles. This doctrine of cycles is structured into periods of 62,000 years, divided into 4 distinct ages, each associated with a metal carrying deep spiritual and alchemical symbolism. At the beginning of each cycle lies the Golden Age, a prosperous era lasting roughly 25,000 years, during which harmony and spirituality prevail. Then comes the Silver Age, lasting a little over 18,000 years, during which spirituality begins to fade, gradually giving way to the warrior instincts and dominant nature of humankind. Next comes the Age of Bronze, also known as the Age of Copper, lasting around 12,000 years. This period is marked by the deeper, primal, simian nature of humanity, moving even further away from profound spirituality, giving rise to forced domination over nature and the emergence of organized warfare. Finally comes the Iron Age, lasting 6,200 years, defined by total and senseless domination, by wars, destruction, and gratuitous violence. The moral values of the previous ages are rejected, and selfishness becomes the ruling force of the world. The end of the Iron Age signals the renewal of the cycle and the arrival of a new Golden Age, a time that, in theory, offers humanity a chance to learn, to rise, and to slowly but surely move away from the brutality of its animal nature and draw closer to the divine. This cyclical decline also reflects a human decline, both in moral values and in physical, even morphological attributes. If that's the case, then the civilizations of each age may not represent a continuous line of the same species, but rather a succession of different races, different humanities. Although genetically similar, they may have been truly distinct from one another, each rising and falling in turn. And according to the doctrine of cycles, this would imply a gradual genetic and moral decline from the Golden Age all the way to the fall of the Iron Age. If this vision is accurate, then the different sons of South American mythology, as well as the great ancient theosophical civilizations, may in fact represent different humanities, with a capital H, each one composed of various hominid species that once inhabited our planet, leaving behind not only the memory of their legendary traditions, but also the megalithic remnants that still stand across the globe today. Just like Neanderthals, who, had they not disappeared 30,000 years ago, could have coexisted with Homo sapiens sapiens as two separate humanities on Earth, the Hyperboreans, Atlanteans or Lemurians may have been other hominid species that once inhabited our planet. They could have developed their own cultures and civilizations across the globe before vanishing completely. Vanished completely? Not quite. Genetic studies have shown that over 2% of the genome of Eurasian Homo sapiens sapiens comes from Neanderthal DNA. If a hominid species different from our own, and now extinct, was able to leave such a significant mark on our DNA, then it is scientifically possible that remnants of Hyperborean, Lemurian, or Atlantean genetics may still exist within certain ethnic groups on our planet. The unique characteristics of certain indigenous peoples around the world may, in fact, be the multimillennial remnants of the different humanities that came before us, echoes of past human species that never completely vanished, but instead became part of us, embedded deep within, allowing them to endure across the ages. To even consider such a hypothesis, we must first step outside the narrow lines drawn by official history books. And yet, the truth may be even broader than what we've discussed so far. The most illustrious civilizations that came before us, whether from Sumer, South America, or Northern Europe, share one striking feature: their spiritual systems, or what mainstream history calls religious beliefs, seem to contain notable similarities. Beyond the fact that the pantheons of deities across these different cultures are remarkably similar, often appearing as if they were reinterpretations of one another, they all share a common claim that their knowledge, their wisdom, and ultimately their civilization were gifts from the gods. These deities all tend to share one striking trait: they come from elsewhere, arriving in these regions to help establish and shape human civilization. And when we bring together the accounts of these divine origins across ancient cultures, one question inevitably arises: could there be a place of origin for the gods? A divine homeland? A specific location from which these deities set out to spread human civilization across the earth? The gods of the great cultures that came before us are, more often than not, described as non-terrestrial beings. Just like the Anunnaki, said to have originated from another celestial body, most deities credited with bringing human civilization to Earth are described as coming from elsewhere, from the stars, from the heavens. This may also explain the deep fascination ancient peoples had with astronomy, as well as the remarkably advanced knowledge they possessed in that field. By analyzing the architecture and spiritual practices of these ancient peoples, we find that across the globe and at different points in time, the same constellations and the same stars consistently reappear as sacred and central to their civilizations. The constellation of Orion, for example, clearly appears as a structural marker in the architectural alignments of both Egypt and Central America. Robert Bauval, a civil engineer from the mid-20th century, established a direct correlation between the ground layout of the three great pyramids of Giza and the three stars of Orion's belt. His demonstration was then extended to the entire Nile Valley, showing that the various sites in this region were a ground-level representation of the map of the sky. The same goes for the Pleiades, the 7 stars of the Taurus constellation, which were given a truly sacred status throughout Northern Europe. This specific grouping also appears on the Nebra sky disk, an ancient remnant of human genius and their vast astronomical knowledge. It can also be found in rock carvings on Mount Bego in southern France, dating back 6,000 years. These facts tend to support the hypothesis of a celestial origin for the various gods of these cultures, leaving such a profound mark on human civilizations that they carved them into stone, depicted them on their most sacred ornaments, and even embedded them in their most monumental architectures. All these clues about the origins and interactions of ancient gods with scattered civilizations across the planet therefore tend to suggest an exogenous origin of the deities, beings who came to assist humanity in its development. The oldest texts claim that these gods brought knowledge to humankind, that they transmitted wisdom, science, agriculture, and animal husbandry, giving humans the means to settle, organize, and build prosperous civilizations. If this is possibly true for our own civilization, for our so-called Adamic humanity, why wouldn't it also apply to those that came before us? Could it be that the great civilizations of earlier humanities, whether Hyperborean, Lemurian, or Atlantean, were also in contact with or even assisted by exogenous beings? The answer to this question, unfortunately, won't be found in archaeological remains or ancient texts. Since we possess no material evidence of these vanished civilizations, civilizations far too ancient and distant from our own, we cannot rely solely on physical traces from the past. Yet, other sources of information do exist. While they may not be conventional and are often discredited or criticized, they remain what they are: sources of information. By gathering certain accounts from mediumistic channelings, past life regression sessions, and theosophical or esoteric texts, it is still possible to establish connections between these ancient lost civilizations and extraterrestrial beings. The great civilization of Mu, which once flourished in the Pacific on a now lost continent, located between Easter Island, Hawaii, and the Fiji Islands, is said to have received guidance and spiritual support from an exogenous race originating from the constellation Lyra. Beings who were ideologically advanced and deeply connected to nature and its energies. The Lyrans are said to have been avian humanoids, bird-like beings with bluish skin, peaceful and benevolent. They are believed to have shared their knowledge, wisdom, and support with the people of Mu, guiding them toward a harmonious development in alignment with nature. Traces of these Lyran gods, these avian exogenous beings, can still be found today in Pascuan culture. Before the arrival of Europeans on Easter Island in the 17th century, the Pascuans, who were the last heirs of the ancient culture of Mu, worshipped a spiritual deity named Make, a man-bird god. Certain annual rituals of great importance, held in the southwest of the island, were entirely dedicated to him. Although the birdman cult completely vanished from Pascuan culture with European colonization and the sudden loss of their traditions, some carvings still visible today on the island bear witness to this devotion and the significance of avian gods for these people. Could this be a remnant of the Liran people, that exogenous birdman civilization believed to have helped develop the great civilization of the lost continent of Mu? That's for you to decide. Closer to us in time, the legendary Atlantis, the mythical people described in the ancient writings of Plato, can also be linked to beings from elsewhere. Although it is more difficult to determine exactly which species may have supported or assisted them in their development, certain mediumistic accounts report the presence of advanced technology specific to the Atlantean civilization. Our modern society and its technology are primarily based on the fossil fuels of our planet. Coal, gas, and oil have indeed propelled our Adamic civilization into the industrial age and modernity. However, according to various mediumistic accounts, the Atlanteans possessed a completely different form of energy. Their technology appeared to rely on the use of crystals. Much like our nuclear reactors that generate a phenomenal amount of energy, the Atlanteans are said to have mastered crystal technology, providing them with immense energy resources and allowing for advanced technological development. However, various accounts also suggest that this mastery of crystals as an energy source was not an invention of the great Atlantean civilization. It was rather a gift granted to this humanity to support its development and growth. Offered? But by whom? Well, according to mediumistic sources, this essential gift that fueled the development of the Atlanteans was granted to them by cosmic beings. It wasn't just one particular species, but rather a coalition of different exogenous civilizations that, with the intent of helping and guiding the Atlantean humanity, gave them the perpetual energy of the crystals. Thus, several extraterrestrial races, apparently benevolent, are believed to be linked to the civilization of Atlantis. The flaws of these human beings eventually led to the total destruction of their civilization, which could be attributed to the mismanagement of the crystal technology that did not originally belong to them. As for our own humanity, whose history goes back only a few thousand years, we cannot ignore the illustrious gods of Sumer, the first deities in recorded history. According to this mythology, these gods came from a planet different from Earth called Nibiru, and they allegedly colonized our world in order to create humankind. It would therefore seem, if one opens their mind and considers a world broader than the one ideologically imposed on us, that different extraterrestrial civilizations may have existed throughout Earth's long history, coming from various planets and constellations. These galactic mentors may have attempted to guide those ancient civilizations by sharing part of their knowledge. In light of all these elements, these observations, and all these testimonies, one essential question remains. Who are we really in the end? Our Adamic civilization, which goes back only a few millennia while our planet has existed for billions of years, does it really have solid proof of what we think we know about our own history? We base our understanding of the past on physical, material traces, but matter disappears over time. Today, there are still two major worldviews that stand in stark opposition on this subject. One of them holds that we, as human beings, are the creation of a single divine entity. In this perspective, humanity is the ultimate achievement of a creator, representing the highest point of his divine plan. Or we are the product of a natural evolution, a biological process that unfolded over billions of years, beginning with the most primitive single-celled organisms in Earth's primordial soup, and leading to a species that surpassed all others in intellect, technology, and creativity. However, neither of these two views truly answers the questions we keep asking ourselves, as both remain confined within their own dogmas, preventing any evolution or reconsideration of what they claim to be the truth. Take the example of the Cyclopean walls of Sacsayhuaman. Who built them? Why and how? What kind of knowledge, skills, or technology did they possess? These structures are undeniably real, standing right before our eyes, yet we still know nothing about their true origin or the people who built them. Neither of the two major perspectives on history, whether religious and monotheistic or scientific and mainstream, can offer any real answers to this mystery. Only ancient traditions and non-dogmatic writings, those hidden teachings we must search for with patience, can offer a doorway to real answers. This doesn't necessarily mean they are true or hold absolute truth, but at the very least, they have the merit of opening up the field of possibilities and offering a broader, more expansive vision of our history and the many humanities that may have come before us. The questions remain unanswered, if not multiplied, but if we step back and consider this alternative timeline, and if we stop viewing ourselves as a superior species rightfully dominating all other forms of life, whether terrestrial or not, then perhaps a glimmer of hope could begin to shine through. Throughout the world, many ancient mythologies speak of creator gods, powerful beings said to have come from distant realms, from the stars, or from higher planes of existence. These stories, found across cultures and continents, suggest a recurring idea that creation itself stems from a multiplicity of divine sources. The interactions between these exogenous beings and human creations throughout Earth's history could then be seen as the result of a greater will, one that lies at the very origin of our physical universe. Our ancient gods might simply be the messengers of this primordial divine entity, acting according to its will to spread life and deepen its experience and incarnations within the material world. Let's take an example. The Anunnaki were regarded as gods by the earliest civilizations of our humanity. The peoples of Sumer and Mesopotamia even credited them with the creation of our species, making them, in the eyes of humankind, true creator gods. However, when we take a step back and adopt a broader perspective, the Anunnaki may not truly be the supreme creators as they were once perceived. Rather, they could be understood as emissaries, powerful intermediaries acting on behalf of a much greater force, the infinite source of all things, what some might call the All, or the original divine intelligence. This primordial energy, the origin of all consciousness and creation, would have sent the Anunnaki to Earth with a specific purpose: to give form to a new branch of humanity, to set in motion a grand experiment of life on this planet. Through their actions, this source did not merely create new beings, but sought to deepen its own self-awareness, to expand the scope of living experience, and to explore the endless range of what life could be. The goal was not just to create biological forms, but to expand the ways consciousness could grow and evolve. By allowing endless paths and experiences, the original source could witness, through its creations, the infinite potential of existence across time, space, and matter.